Now that Democrat President Barack Obama has been elected for another 4 years, right-wing radio personality Glenn Beck can end his fast and prayer for the election of Republican Mitt Romney. Maybe this guy can have him some Chick-fil-A. Now in Indiana, you're going to have Richard Murdoch losing his bid for U.S. Senate, possibly due to his debate response on rape, abortion, and God. So you've got Republican Richard Murdoch saying, I struggled with it myself for a long time, but I came to realize life is that gift from God. I think that even when life begins in that horrible situation of rape, that it is something that God intended to happen. A lot of people are going to say that Richard Murdoch lost the Senate election to Democrat Joe Donnelly because of that comment. A lot of right-wingers defending Richard Murdoch for that comment, but under that wisdom, Murdoch may as well say, even in that horrible situation of President Obama's re-election, it is something God intended. You're not going to hear these right-wingers say that, but they are going to grab onto this Holy Bible, and Glenn Beck, really grabbing on hard the day after President Barack Obama wins re-election. So it's going to be Glenn Beck grabbing onto the works of Thomas Paine. Wikipedia will tell you that Thomas Paine was an English-American political activist, author, political theorist, and revolutionary. So let's hear the words of Thomas Paine by way of Glenn Beck.
Thomas Paine gave a message at the end. He appealed. You knew these things to be right and righteous and full of common sense. You knew what was true. But the man who is called a deist, a man who believed that God was a watchmaker, who later said there is no God, said it this time, that God Almighty will not give up a people to destruction or leave them unsupported to perish. He will not abandon those who have so earnestly and so repeatedly sought to avoid calamities by every decent method which wisdom could invent. Though the flame of liberty may sometimes cease to shine, the coal shall never expire. Our sponsor this half hour is taxresolution.com. If you owe the IRS over $20,000 or have unfiled returns or you're under audit, you need to know that you can get help. Tax Resolution helps good people get out of bad IRS situations every single day. Let me talk to you off of the copy points here for a minute. I would imagine, seeing that elections have consequence, that the IRS is only going to get more brutal. If you have a tax issue, I urge you today to go to taxresolution.com or call 866-IRS-PROBLEMS. 866-IRS-PROBLEMS. Glenn Beck, GlennBeck.com. You are listening to Glenn Beck. Mercury.
That's the kind of corporate constitutional nonsense we get to listen to all day in Fort Wayne, Indiana, thanks to WOWO-AM 1190. So, I don't know if Thomas Paine said any of that stuff about taxresolution.com. I don't think he did. But Glenn Beck, when he quotes Thomas Paine, it seems like Glenn Beck does a little editing of the Crisis #1 by Thomas Paine. So this is what Glenn Beck has to say when he's quoting Thomas Paine. God Almighty will not give up a people to destruction or leave them unsupported to perish. He will not abandon those who have so earnestly and so repeatedly sought to avoid calamities by every decent method which wisdom could invent. That's Thomas Paine by way of Glenn Beck. Let's go to Thomas Paine by way of Thomas Paine in The Crisis Number 1. God Almighty will not give up a people to military destruction or leave them unsupportedly to perish, who had earnestly and so repeatedly sought to avoid the calamities of war by every decent method which wisdom could invent. So Thomas Paine talks about God Almighty will not give up a people to military destruction. God Almighty will not give up on a people who so repeatedly sought to avoid the calamities of war. Glenn Beck doesn't understand why Thomas Paine uses such silly words like military destruction and calamities of war. Glenn Beck has found that butchering the Bible through his fast and prayer didn't work. These Republicans could not unseat the Christian they call a Muslim for the Mormon they call a Christian. It didn't work. Religion didn't work. Now the question is, will racism work where religion fails? Well, people, you've got to understand, when you go to WOWO-AM in Fort Wayne, WOWO, W-O-W-O, may as well stand for white on white only. WOWO-AM does not employ non-Caucasian people as on-air talent. It's going to be the day after President Barack Obama wins re-election on WOWO-AM in Fort Wayne. You've got Mark Souder, the former Indiana representative who had to leave office because he cheated on God and his wife. Well, you're going to have Mark Souder talking to WOWO-AM personality Charly Butcher about the white man vote. These guys just talking about how the white man apparently just didn't show up because Mitt Romney lost. These guys can't figure it out, going over all this race-based stuff concerning the vote. But when you listen to WOWO, the same radio station on the night of the election, well, you got Pat Miller just crying about CBS News reporting about the white male vote. Pat Miller says, yeah, that just goes to show you they always want to make it about race. So that's the kind of confusion you're going to get on WOWO-AM. White on white only, whipping up all this racism, but they don't understand it because it's just a bunch of white people talking about this stuff. Now, people, you gotta understand, Dean Robinson loves him some white folk. I love your culture, these movies and this music, this rock and roll stuff. I love it. I wish you'd give these brothers some more love in the rock and roll. These sitcoms, I love them. Like this Big Bang Theory, not a bad show. But why can't you have a brother or a sister as a brainiac? Why can't we be smart? I would take it. Black people love white people. When you talk to black people and you talk about their favorite movies and whatnot, well, yeah, going to be talking about all these white actors in white movies. Yes, people. And as far as I'm concerned, these white women, I love them. I've had sexual relations with several of them, and people, I love it. So don't go getting the idea that there's going to be some sort of big race war in America based on black people just tearing stuff down. I mean, when you have guys like Alex Jones in Austin, Texas, well, Alex Jones and Chuck Norris, the Walker Texas Ranger, those mugs are scared for white people in America. They're just so scared. But Alex Jones is going to go to quotes from Bill Maher, the white comedian on HBO, and he's going to go to the works of Michael Moore, the white filmmaker, to talk about how black people are just going to tear down America if President Barack Obama doesn't win re-election. Well, Alex Jones, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, and Glenn Beck can calm down because now that President Barack Obama is President Barack Obama again, they can get whipped up into a frenzy selling taxresolution.com, survival seed, solar panels, And don't forget foodinsurance.com with those freeze-dried ice cream sandwiches. Now, people, I have to pick on these right-wing radio talkers because left-wing radio is music. Left-wing talk radio is a complete failure. Only right-wing talk works on radio. Keep that in mind the next time you hear Glenn Beck bashing you over the head with that Bible and then taking the pain out of Thomas Paine.